It was October 2019 when I was sitting in the office of the psychiatrist who told me point blank with no explanation that I was, quote unquote, one of those people who had only one option: total abstinence. Hi, this is Sarah Connelly and this is the Alcohol-Free Lifestyle Podcast. I'm one of the coaches in the program, and during the podcast today I'm going to be talking about fear, because I can tell you that when the psychiatrist said that to me, I was absolutely terrified. I was so terrified that I remember physically shaking, because the idea of never being able to drink again was just not an option in my mind. My brain kind of exploded, really, and I realized at the time that I had so many excuses as to why I could never not drink again. I remember really clearly this kind of verbal vomit that came out of my mouth, which was something along the lines of, my whole life revolves around drinking, my family, my friends, my social life, my home life, my relationships, my relaxation and celebrations, everything. Not drinking is just not an option for someone like me. I now see the irony in that. But like many of us, I was really good with my excuses. I had them all. And of course now in my job I hear them all, but I hear them with a huge amount of empathy and compassion, because the idea of quitting alcohol for good for many of us can seem almost as bad as losing a limb, because it's played such an important role in our lives. Removing alcohol could arguably be one of the biggest changes that we make as grown-ups in our life, aside from having children, maybe changing jobs. But removing a substance that we've been relying on for 10, 20, 30 years is naturally incredibly scary. And change is scary. Change is something that we tend not to like that much, especially when it comes to changing a habit that we've had for so many years. So this podcast is about looking at the fears, a couple of the main fears that I had myself and that I hear almost on a daily basis, and exploring those fears in the context of how can we reframe them, because otherwise we just stay in this loop of negativity and fear, and we never do what it takes to take the action required to really improve our lives fundamentally at a very, very core level. To remove alcohol is to take away the thing that's holding us back. And yet there are all these fears that keep coming up over and over again. So here are the top 5 that I hear regularly and that I held on to myself for a really long time. And I'll say at this point that these fears are completely normal and completely natural, because, as I've said before, alcohol has played such a big role in our life. So it's not that we shouldn't have these fears. I think we absolutely should, but we should be exploring them through a different lens and not just allowing them to sit there unexamined, because if we don't examine them, we will never find a way to overcome them. The first fear that I will bring up is the fact that oftentimes when people think about removing alcohol, their brain immediately goes into the future, and it's this fear of, if I give up alcohol now, will I never be able to drink again? Now, for any human brain, that's far too much to consider. And personally, I have the approach of never say never. And when I gave up alcohol just over 3.5 years ago, I never said never. And I still don't. Not because I can ever imagine myself drinking again, because I certainly see no value in it at all, but because I feel like our brains are find it very, very hard to contemplate the idea of forever. I guess that's why we often hear in the communities, one day at a time. The second fear, which is really big for many people, is the fear of judgment, and that they will be judged, and people will consider that they have this dark secret, this dark problem. And we'll look at that in just a moment. The third fear being around stress and anxiety, and people concerned about how they're going to manage their stress and anxiety without alcohol, because at this point in time it may be the only way that you feel that you get some relief. The next fear relates to how am I going to function in society, at my business networking events, at weddings, special occasions. Again, we notice that our brains tend to jump to specific occasions where we know they will be highly triggering, and therefore we don't believe that it's possible to navigate these situations without drinking. But I can assure you that I've seen business people and people that are playing key roles at weddings and all sorts of other events and occasions that participants in our program have been terrified of, and then gone on to navigate not only with just getting through them, but more importantly thriving in them and really enjoying them and being present. And many of the connections that are made alcohol-free are way more sustainable and lasting and deeper and more rewarding and fulfilling than any connections that we make when we're drinking and we're not truly present with the people that we're around. And the final fear is really common and comes up all the time, and that's the fact that alcohol is the reward at the end of the day. And so many of us, myself included, would use alcohol as that, distinction to create a line between my work life and my home life. It was the reward that I'd give myself after a hard day's work so that I could then move into my role as a parent. And again, now in retrospect, looking back, all I was doing was numbing. And then I was going into my role as a parent at a kind of 6 out of 10. The reality is that maybe I felt better, maybe I felt less stressed and anxious, but the people in my home, my husband and my children, they copped the stress and anxiety that I was avoiding as a result of my drinking. In fact, I was passing on my stress and anxiety to them. And if you've watched any of James's videos, you'll know that alcohol actually creates stress and anxiety. It creates the very thing that we're using it to try and avoid. So those are the top 5 fears, and I'm going to go into them in just a moment. But I feel like for me, the main underlying fear that sat beneath all of these fears was that I really had no idea how to function as a human being in society without drinking. And that society that I was living in at the time, that community, I suppose, was really soaked in booze. Like everybody was drinking a lot. And so I had no idea really who I was without alcohol. I had no idea how I would relate to the people in my life without alcohol. And I was very, very afraid of finding out. But what I did know for a fact was that I was going to give it a go. I wasn't under any illusion that it was going to be super easy. But I think deep down I trusted that I had it in me to do it. And in many ways, that's a part of me that really, I think, is really helpful. A part of me that is, I believe, probably something that you might relate to as a high achiever or an entrepreneur or business owner. And that is that sense of trust, deep trust in yourself, that when you say you're going to get the job done, you get the job done. Looking back on that day with the psychiatrist, I believe that he was probably wrong to deliver that piece of terrifying news in such a blunt way that you can never drink again. Because I think a lot of people would probably have left the office and never gone back. When we think about it being forever, it's just too big a pill to swallow. And again, I just reiterate that, taking the first step is all that you have to do, and the rest will work itself out over time. Telling yourself it's going to be forever is a surefire way to stay where you are. So obviously I did go back. I went back and I did a 2-week inpatient rehab program and threw myself in. And in actual fact, I think it was my stubbornness that eventually came through for me, being told that I would relapse and I would have been hiding alcohol and all these terrible things that I was told in the rehab clinic. Just further cemented my resolve. Like I was not going to go back on my own word to myself, and I was not going to be proven wrong. So if you have any stubbornness kindness about you. That's a good quality in this context, I think. And the fears that I've talked about earlier, of course, they're really common and universal, and they're shared by everybody. Everybody has the same fears, but we're not going to use those fears as excuses, because on rational examination, there's nothing here that can't be overcome if you really want to overcome it. And the challenge is that when we're in our own heads and we're living through this kind of alcohol-infused, limited view of the world, these fears and excuses get in our way. When we're in this kind of headspace, we're more afraid of the fear than we are of our potential dependency on this toxic, addictive substance. So let's go through the fears that I mentioned earlier, and we're going to be tackling them with a technique called reframing, which is basically looking at each fear from kind of like a 360. Is it really true? Is there another way of looking at this? Can I plant the seed in my mind that this fear perhaps isn't as great and as debilitating as I might think it to be? So the first one, when we imagine life without alcohol, it's so terrifying on so many levels. We just simply can't get our heads around it. So the suggestion here is to imagine life 1 year, 5 years, 10 years from now, if we keep drinking. If we really think about that, that's terrifying on so many levels. We think of our kids, our relationships, our health, our bank balance. All of these things will suffer. We may also add to that the regret that we're going to feel 5, 10 years from now if we don't take action. It's one of the most common things we hear in the program is, I wish I'd done this sooner. And I can say as well that that is the case for me. Looking back on my life, I wish that I'd given up alcohol sooner, because now I realise just how wonderful life is without it. So the invitation is to make imagining life with alcohol the most terrifying option.
James here, pardon the interruption. I just wanted to share some of the results that many of our Project 90 clients have been generating in their life because of not drinking alcohol for at least 90 days. Indipal Johal from California says, I'm having more fun alcohol-free. Victoria from Colorado says, I'm feeling so much happier and positive. Craig from Washington says, I feel more freedom. And John from New York says, I'm feeling so much happier. If you'd like to get your self-confidence back, if you'd like to have more joy, more peace, more happiness in your life, and you are ready and willing to get outside professional support to get off the stop-start cycle with your drinking, join a like-minded community, and finally nip this drinking issue in the bud, then I invite you to go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90, read through, watch through all the details, and if it feels in alignment, then you can schedule a 15-minute exploratory call with one of our coaches. You can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90, and the link is in the show notes. Let's get back to the episode.
The second fear is around people judging us. And it's a really natural fear, like the idea that people will look at us and have a bad opinion of us or think that we're somehow less than we want them to think we are. But the reality is people will always judge you. But in my experience, people never judge you as harshly as they judge themselves. Think about when you meet a non-drinker. Do you judge them or do you admire them? What would you rather be judged for? For your discipline and confidence, glowing skin, amazing health, clarity of mind, strength of character? You could be judged for all of those things. Or you could be judged for being the life and soul of the party, the person that can be relied upon to make a fool of themselves because you're always the last one to leave. That's a judgment too, and not one to wear as a badge of honour. I don't really think anyone's that proud when they say, I was the last one to leave. So again, let's consider, what kind of judgment would you rather have? Judgment for being a person of integrity, authenticity, strength of character, or the one that people kind of have a bit of a laugh about and say, oh yeah, good old John, he's at it again. Perhaps instead we can ask ourselves a more important question. Who is the most significant critic? Is it other people, or is it the face that we look at every day in the mirror? Fear number 3 is, how on earth will I manage my stress and anxiety? Drinking is my only relief. And this one's a short answer. I kind of mentioned it earlier on that we know, scientifically we know, that alcohol causes anxiety, stress and depression. And the more we drink it, the worse those conditions become. So whilst it does provide immediate relief, it actually exacerbates and amplifies the problem long term. And that problem is not going to get any better. In fact, it's going to get worse. So if you believe that alcohol relieves your stress and anxiety, then just tag on to that yes, it may do that, but only for about 20 minutes. And then all the chemicals that are released in your brain as a result of you drinking alcohol start to work towards exacerbating those symptoms. My anxiety before I quit drinking was an all-time high, and it was the hardest thing in the world not to drink, because I could find momentary relief, momentary escape from those really, really challenging feelings. But interestingly, now that I don't drink anymore, my anxiety has all but disappeared. Of course, it perks up once in a while when I'm under stress, but it's nothing like what it used to be like. And now that I don't drink, and many of my other non-alcohol drinking friends talk about this, is that stress also reduces dramatically because our bodies are not filled with cortisol and adrenaline that are a byproduct of our drinking habits. So reframe. I manage my anxiety by not drinking. If I drink, it only makes it worse, and that is a fact. Now, fear number 4 is about the events and occasions, special occasions, and just how important alcohol is in our society at these functions. And a really nice reframe that I've actually experienced is that going to these things alcohol-free is actually an incredibly eye-opening and wonderful opportunity to enjoy the experience of being clear of mind and having genuine confidence, because the anxiety that was fueled by the alcohol is now so much reduced, and we can walk into these events and occasions with confidence, and we can start to really enjoy meeting new people and being able to remember their names and remember their stories. And being present without alcohol also allows us to be very discerning about who we spend our time with at these events. And we're not wasting an hour chatting to someone that we'll never speak to again, but we're just bonding over the fact that we've both had about the same number of glasses of Sauvignon Blanc. And that's pretty much all we have in common. So the reframe is that you can be discerning about who you give your time and energy to. And as a real bonus, and this is something that this never gets old, is the ability to drive to the venue, park up, get out, go have a great time, and then leave whenever you feel like it, because no one else is going to even notice by the time you leave. And finally, the reward at the end of the day. This is the really common one, and one that everybody struggles with, because we all have that romantic version of getting home, taking up a glass of wine, sitting back in our chair, relaxing. And yet, again, it comes down to the difference between instant gratification and long-term genuine reward. Of course, having that drink will relieve your stress in that moment, but what it will also do is increase your stress when you wake up in the morning. When you don't drink, you wake up rested, ready for the day. You have learnt new skills, so you punctuate your day with breathing skills, with exercise, with knowing when your nervous system is out of kilter and remembering to stop and just reset. And as a result, you actually get more stuff done during the day, and you're building up your stores of reward chemicals so that by the end of the day, you're not so tired and exhausted and stressed out that the only way that you feel you can relax is by having a drink. So the reframe here is actually, I wake up rested and ready for the day every day. If I need a reward, I will choose something that doesn't lead to me feeling like crap tomorrow. Not drinking is my reward. Not drinking is the way that I manage my stress and anxiety, and not drinking is the way that I reward myself at the end of a hard day. So these are some examples of reframes that I used for a really long time because I, as I said, had all those fears. And they're a really good start. But the most important thing is in the doing and experiencing of these benefits. What happens over time is you build up a bank of positive experiences being alcohol free. And these new experiences become your new reality. You start to consciously create these new habits, and over time they become subconscious and you don't even need to think about them anymore. It's just the way that it is. You can rewire your brain in exactly the same way that you wired it to desire alcohol. You take an action, you like it, you repeat it until it becomes a habit. Of course, the significant difference here is that alcohol is an addictive substance, so it was a lot easier for us to create those habits in the first place, and to create these new habits takes dedication and time. If there's one skill that I've learned the most in my alcohol-free journey, it's the skill of patience. The skill of recognizing my innate desire for immediate gratification and learning how to rein that in for longer-term good. We are living in a commercially driven society that often tells us, or always tells us in fact, that quick, easy solutions are available to all of our problems. But it never really works out that way. In my experience of 49 years of trying to do all sorts of challenging things in my life, things take time. And the more that I'm realistic about my goals and my progress, the more likely I am to succeed. So the final reframe that I invite you to consider before I finish this session is about fear. We spend our lives running away from things that are uncomfortable, and fear is uncomfortable. But could we potentially start to look at fear as a friend, imagining a life where our fear transforms into fuel, into motivation to drive and inspire you, instead of keeping you stuck, small and dependent. If you think back over your life at times where you've overcome a big fear, it's usually, if not always, followed by a period of feeling a real deep, profound sense of achievement. We all know when fear is holding us back, we all know how it makes us feel. We feel out of control, we feel like we have no agency, we feel like we're less than. And I think it really feeds the inner critical voice telling us that we can't do things. So the invitation for all of us is to look at where fear is holding us back and consider whether or not this ability that we know we have, we believe we have, to overcome that fear might be the greatest opportunity, the portal in a way, if you like, to our greatest personal growth. That's something that we can get really excited about, and maybe even turn that emotion of fear into a feeling of excitement and anticipation about what's possible for us on the other side.
Hi there, this is James Swanwick. Thank you so much for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you would leave a review. That will help us climb the rankings and get our show exposed to so many more people who could really benefit from the content. You can do that by going into Apple Podcasts, rating the show, writing a little one-sentence summary, and posting it. That would be so amazing. Thank you. Likewise, if you would like to schedule a 15-minute exploratory call and apply for our Project 90 program, then you can do so by going to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/project90. If you'd like to get the free guide, that is the Alcohol Freedom Formula Guide, you can go to alcoholfreelifestyle.com/guide. Our YouTube channel is at alcoholfreelifestyle.com/YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at James Swanwick. Thank you so much for listening. We so appreciate you, and we'll catch you on the next one.